disability awareness through our Towards Inclusion workshop and game kit discussion for Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind, USA. Conducted by Ms Ritika Sahni, trainer and disability campaigner, founder trustee, Trinayani. Namaskar to everybody. Namaste. All the way from Mumbai. Towards Inclusion is a workshop that we curated after we launched the Disability Awareness 6-in-1 card game kit in 2020, just before the pandemic hit us. How you will actually play the games here is very different from how it is played physically, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of it. Helen Keller said that the chief handicap of the blind is not their blindness, but the attitude of seeing people towards them. And the idea for Trinayani, and Trinayani actually, for some of you who are wondering, means the third eye. It's the deity with the third eye. Shiva, Kali, Durga, means intuitive power, higher conscious. Entire idea behind Trinayani is to be able to tell people to go beyond what they see and to think deeply and go beyond what is just physically apparent to them. Michael Crichton, I got this quote: if you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know that you're part of a tree. And therefore, before we actually get down to the awareness, and I quickly want to tell you that, the 1800s, people with disabilities in America were thought to be pitiful, meager, unfit, unable to contribute to society, abnormal. Those are the terms that were used, were institutionalized, were sent to the asylum. And then, of course, the civil rights movement happened in the 1900s. Affirmative action, equal opportunity law, the assistive technology. And by 1990, self-advocacy took forefront. Parent advocate, self-advocate. And in 1990, you had the Americans with Disabilities Act, which actually opened doors for many people. One research says that before 1990, a blind Harvard law student failed to acquire a seat in a law firm. A person with polio, mobility impaired, could not receive the teaching certificate from New York University. So it is the American with Disabilities Act that really brought about the change as far as US is concerned. And as far as the international Human Rights Treaty, the United Nations Convention for Rights for Persons with Disabilities, this is something that all of us should be aware of, anybody who wants to know anything about disability, because it is the first international human rights treaty dealing with the rights of persons with disabilities. Many, many countries ratified it. India ratified it in 2007. And the very recent Rights for Persons with Disabilities Act in India was enacted with a view to fulfill the obligations under the UNCRPD. What's very important, ladies and gentlemen, is to understand that a law can mandate, but it cannot change hearts. The stereotypes, the biases, they're too deeply ingrained about persons with disabilities. The assumptions that we make, the stereotypes that we have about them is too deeply ingrained, or what is normal, or how does one go about understanding diversity. We are all raised understanding normalcy in a certain way, and anything that is a little away from the way one is supposed to walk or talk or think or speak or hear is something that makes us question the ability. We start presuming incompetence in anybody who does things differently. Are you all set to play the game? The first game that we're going to play, and I'm going to share the screen again, is called Do You Know? Disability is not a disease.
It's a fact.
Please unmute. Sorry?
It's a fact.
Correct. It's a fact.
Do not bully is a value.
Correct. Third.
Deepa Malik, a wheelchair user, is an Indian athlete and silver medalist in 2016 Paralympics in shot put. I think that is a sporting event.
Achievers?
Could be achiever, maybe
Yep.
achiever as well.
It's an achiever. Correct.
Okay.
World Dwarf Games are probably a sporting event. I don't know.
Yes. Next, the blue card.
Is guide dog, is that count as mobility devices or blindness?
Blindness.
All right.
Not a device. Subtitling and captioning.
That'd be deafness.
Correct?
Olympics sporting event.
Correct?
Light without sight is a book, I'm guessing.
In the barrier beacon, you have to match the red card, which are the barrier cards, to the green cards, which are the solution cards. Number 11.
L.
Correct. Is there any other, just to ask, is there any other thing that one can use if you're having a hearing loss?
Maybe sign language.
Yes, that's for communication. Sign language would be a communication aid. You're absolutely right. But if you have a hearing loss, you have matched hearing aids with this. So would you be aware of other technological advancement in this?
Subtitles.
Subtitle makes entertainment accessible. You're correct.
A cochlear implant.
Cochlear implant, correct. So cochlear implant, even with hearing aids, the technology, and this is something that most of us, as employers, as employees, we need to understand that the way technology has changed our lives, that's exactly how it has changed the lives of people with disabilities. There are assistive devices and technology available to people with blindness and deafness and hearing impairment and wheelchair users. They can use that to become part of any workforce. And until the employer realizes that, and that dawns onto him, the life of someone with a disability will not change, because he or she could be capable and could be a computer scientist and could be very, very educated. But the person who's going to employ him or her has to be educated in the disability sector to be able to understand that, hey, this person looks very, very disabled. But that does not mean that cognitively he's not being able to function well. So it is something that we must as employers, as human beings, as individuals understand that our own biases, stereotypes, ignorance should not come in the way of the progress of this entire largest minority group in the world. A question for you. If subtitle is what makes films or television programs accessible to deaf people, how does it become accessible to someone who's blind?
Audio description.
Any idea?
Yeah.
Yes, audio description. Now, surprise, surprise, it's a game which has two cards which says facts. One card says facts and one says misconception. So for example, if I have to read this out, people with disabilities always need help. Is it a fact or a misconception?
Conception.
We can tell by looking at a person if they have a disability.
Misconception.
Which are the invisible disabilities?
Mental health.
Yes, absolutely. Mental health, psychosomatic disorders, number one, yes.
Dyslexia.
Learning disabilities, all the learning disabilities, yes.
Deafness.
Deafness. Yeah, deafness is I could be deaf wearing in the ear hearing aid, and you might never know. All people who are blind read Braille.
Misconception.
Misconception.
Yeah, why?
Because
you're right.
I mean, they probably don't have access or they were not taught.
Yes, could be the answer.
Yeah,
but what is the other answer? If they don't read Braille, what do they do?
Audio?
One is that you said, yes, absolutely. So remember, there is a huge population in any country which becomes blind much later in life for various reasons. Now, you then don't get into learning Braille. You then are completely into the audio books, or that's why the audio books or digital libraries that have come up is again a huge advancement for our friends who are blind. So it's a misconception.
Ritika, there are several sign language for the Braille. Is that universal? Is there only one?
Sign language is not blind.
Just thinking that they are different. You talked about the Indian sign language.
Absolutely, every country.
For the Braille.
Every country has its own sign language. But people with disabilities are also diverse. They are not a homogeneous group. If you know someone on a wheelchair, and let's say you employ someone on a wheelchair, he or she comes with his or her unique difficulties and needs. and it could be very different from someone who's again another wheelchair user. So it's not a homogeneous group, and therefore you don't have every country has their own sign language. You have the American Sign Language, the British Sign Language, the Danish Sign Language. You have it, the French Sign Language. Sign language is there. There are many sign languages.
Maybe we can come up with a sign language app where you load all the different.
There are. Oh, you'll be surprised at how many. See there, you talk about app, and my next thing is there are many smartphone apps to help people with disability. There are many. It is a fact. It is a fact, because what you should do after we finish this session is each one of you go into your settings, go into the accessibility, and you will see how many everyone's smartphone has certain accessibility features already inbuilt into it, which helps people with disabilities. And over and above that, they also download other apps. My most favorite game, and I'm going to go into this, it's a speed card game. So here in this speed card game, there are 2 sets of cards, set A, set B. Each set has 4 orange cards, which are the inappropriate cards, not to be used. And the player has to match 3 appropriate cards with each inappropriate card. Played very differently when you play it here.
Person who uses a mobility device.
One, fantastic. Number
person
one,
who
yes.
is a wheelchair user.
Correct.
Persons who have difficulty walking or moving.
Is there a better one there?
Yeah.
Person who moves with the help of a wheelchair. You're absolutely right. Now, what happens when you are on a wheelchair? The wheelchair provides you mobility. It gives you independence. How can you be confined to it? It's just the opposite. It allows you to be mobile. Another very common term, handicap. Instead of saying handicap, what is it that you can say? Instead of saying handicap.
Person with a disability.
Correct. And 3. Remember, 3. I'm giving you 3 appropriate phrases for one inappropriate phrase.
Who has or lives with a disability.
Yes. Person who has or lives with a disability. One more. Who are we to say they are suffering? Just because you're on a wheelchair doesn't mean you're unhealthy. I mean, we are the one who could be having cholesterol and diabetic, and the person on the wheelchair could be a very healthy person. These are perceptions that we...
Yeah.
Yes, please. Third one.
Should we say disabled person?
Yes. I know there is this whole thing about, yes, it's all right to say disabled person or a person with a disability. But disabled person is fine. People with disabilities don't have an issue with being called blind or deaf or disabled person. So the right answers, you're right, is person who has or lives with a disability. I've already given you a person with a disability and a disabled person. Because a handicap is a barrier or a circumstance that makes progress or success difficult. A handicap is something that is imposed by the society. The person simply has an impairment and a disability. But if you invite a person on a wheelchair and then have a flight of stairs, then it is the building that has handicapped the person with the disability. So the term handicapped is not to be used with the person with the disability. It is to be used with the environment. So bingo is like, I mean, if everybody's played bingo, let's just go on to what you have to do in the bingo that we have. We've got these 5 sheets. Bingo is the only card game where 5 people have to play, because there are 5 sheets and there are 45 cards. There are 45 cards. The idea here is to match pictures with the appropriate labels. So that's what you'll have to do. Again, stated here for winning. For example, where will the first picture go? And of course, it's like bingo. So first line, second line, 4 corners, full house. Whoever does the full house says inclusion bingo, shouts inclusion bingo.
2.
You're right.
Accessibility options on a smartphone.
Correct. Next.
Using a head pointer to communicate.
Yes. So this is someone who's non-verbal. Let's say Stephen Hawking. Use the VOCA, voice output communication A. Next, please.
Braille watch.
Braille watch.
I think it's the braille, slate, and stylus.
Yes. The Braille, slate, and style.
Or student with low vision.
It's student with low vision. Correct. Next one.
16.
wheelchair basketball players.
Wheelchair basketball player. You are absolutely right. Thank you so much. I sincerely hope that I was able to do justice to what you wanted, Riyadh. I want you to get an idea of what we do at Trinayani.
Thanks a lot, Ritika, and yeah, we would have loved to go a bit more, and we'll keep on exchanging. I'd really be interested to hear more on your take on how to be more open in the workspace for people with disabilities, how to make it more accessible and give the opportunity to people with different types of disabilities to join and work. So you mentioned earlier people working in ITs, different tools that I wasn't aware at all of that. So you probably have a lot of useful tips and things that you've seen working with the different cooperation and how to make it better. So I think we should keep on exchanging on that. It's going to be really interesting.
Thank you so much.
If you would like to start a conversation about disability and inclusion at your workplace, NGO or college, reach out to us like Atlantic Shores did. Mail us at ritika@trinayani.org or call at 97693 57390. Follow us on our social media handles for regular updates.